Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in this session. My name is Jonathan Garrido-Lecca, and I am a Senior Solutions Engineer for the ESRI commercial sector. And today, I have the pleasure to share with you some news about something really exciting, and it is expanding your geospatial analytics using cloud data warehousing, and in this case, using the amazing technology of Snowflake. Now, the first thing I would like to mention is basically to answer the question, why Esri and Snowflake? So just let me give you a little bit of context. Nowadays, the word AI is becoming almost omnipresent. Most organizations are seeking to implement their own AI strategy. And as they pursue this goal, they realize that you cannot have an AI strategy without a data strategy. That includes all geospatial data in our context. That is why data warehousing and GIS collaboration is becoming more and more popular. We allow organizations to centralize and standardize data from various sources while enabling spatial data management, analysis, and visualization for planning and problem solving. So let me jumping into the next thing. So when you think about a Snowflake, you realize that it's more than just data management. It is an AI platform that allows users to leverage multiple existing models in a centralized way. In other words, you are bringing analytics close to your data. But Snowflake relies on partnerships to create and provide advanced analytical models. And here is where Esri plays a key role. As the global leader in GIS analytics, Esri, via our ArcGIS platform, provides Snowflake with multiple spatial analytical models. Ultimately, this is how we would like you to see this integration. An integration that goes beyond data visualization, an integration that allows users, ArcGIS users, and Snowflake users to bring the best of GIS into your data. And that can be done through different ways. You can leverage our GeoAI models. As you can see, we have multiple deep learning models for data extraction when it comes to imagery. We have geo machine learning models that you can leverage also. But also, if you want to streamline the creation of maps, we have our AI assistants that allows you with map creation or automating query definitions and so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, we are bringing these two platforms to allow you to use these advanced geospatial models. Now, there are multiple ways how we have developed integrations between these two platforms. And in this diagram, you can see that we can classify those integrations in two main groups. We have integrations for the transformation of your data, and you can see that on the top here. Basically, these integrations will allow you to geo-enrich your data. You can use our location services for geocoding, routing, very complex routing problems that like BRP. You can also bring our Esri data into the mix using our services like geo-enrichment. So there are multiple ways how you can do that, and there are multiple tools depending on your skills and how do you want to automate this process. And on the right side, you have these tools for analysis and visualization. You have our premium tool, ArcGIS Pro, that not only will allow you to connect into Snowflake, but as you know, it allows you to access hundreds of geospatial tools. But also, when it comes to app creation, you can use our app builders. You have our dashboards, our experience builders, and if you're a developer, you can use our JavaScript API. And with these tools, you can create custom map-centric applications. Those are applications which allow the user to have multiple features on the map. But some of you also have big investments in reporting platforms, right? Like Power BI Well, we also have integrations with those platforms. So if you are looking to implement different reports with Power BI, you can leverage our plugin into Power BI and create chart-centric reports with the power of S3. Now, there is a different way how we can represent this diagram, and is this one here. In this one, we not only are listing the number of integrations and components that you can use, but also, if you notice, we identify the type of connection. So you have in blue those connections that are read-only, and in yellow, those that not only allow you to read information directly from a Snowflake, but you can write back. But instead of describing each one of these, I think that the best way to visualize these connections is by showing you a demo. So let me give you a little bit of context for what you are about to see. So imagine that you are a database/GIS analyst in the organization, and you are tasked to identify and mitigate risk exposure in your company. You are working for an insurance company. Okay, so your goal is to identify these areas with high risk, and you will need to access GIS data. So that's the first challenge you have. You will need to find a way to integrate that GIS data into your main database, and you are using Snowflake. And you realize that you are also an Esri user, you have access to Esri technology, so you would like to use this new integration between these two platforms. Okay, so that's the scenario. Let me jump in and start with this process then. So let's go to Snowflake. Here, for example, you can see that I am just doing a simple selection into Snowflake. I have my database here, and by making a query, you can see now my policy table. This is a normal table. It has, hundreds of millions of rows, and you can see that one of the main columns is this total insured value. Okay, so total insured value. It also have addresses, which is very important, but it doesn't have latitude and longitude. So the first step I want to make before I start with the mapping process, of course, is I want to execute a process known as geocoding. I want to transform these addresses into latitude and longitude. To do that, there are multiple ways how I can do it. The simplest way is by going into ArcGIS Pro and then establishing a connection to a Snowflake. You can see here how simple it is just to open a connection. And then this is a smart connection. It not only lists the tables that I have into my Snowflake instance, but also it identifies which tables have a geometry type and which tables are just plainly flat, right? They don't have a geometry type, they don't have a geometry column, they just have addresses, for example. So the table I want to geocode is this one, and what I can do is I can pull that table here into my my canvas, my content, and then through the analysis tab, I can launch the data interoperability extension. You just click here, open the workbench, and then the data interoperability workbench is going to start. So this is the new UI I have here. And the process is pretty simple. You don't need to be a Python developer to do this. You just need to understand there are three main concepts here. You have the reader, the writer, and the transformer. So data interoperability have a Snowflake reader, as you can see here, that is connecting to my Snowflake database to that specific table. Then I can use a specific transformer that is called geocoding transformer. Pretty straightforward. I specified if I want to connect to ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. I pass the parameters, click OK, and then, of course, what I want to do is I want to write back into the same table through a writer. Okay, so if I execute this process, it basically will take the addresses and create that X and Y fields into my table. So that's pretty straightforward. It's a very simple process through data interoperability. Now, some of you are more familiar with Python. So for you, what we have is in ArcGIS Pro, you have this notebook environment. So here, for example, Look how simply I can, through Python, connect to the table. I don't have to establish a new connection. I can just use the connection that I just established in Pro. And then through Python and our libraries in ArcPy or RAS for Python, we can geocode. And then using the best practices that Snowflake provides, I can write back this information into Snowflake using Snowpark. So again, pretty straightforward process. You geocode locally, you write back into Snowflake. You can do this using the notebooks that we have in RAS Pro, but also you can do this using the notebooks in RAS Enterprise. So similar process. The last way that I want to show you today is a different way. So instead of running this process into ArcGIS, you can also do the other way. You can run this process in Snowflake by calling what we call our location services. So here, for example, I am in the notebook environment of Snowflake. I just import some libraries. And by importing some libraries, what I will do is I'm creating a UDF. So here, for example, you can see that I'm creating a UDF called Esri geocode address. Okay, this UDF is calling my geocoding services. You can either point to our SaaS offering, our location services, the geocoding instance for that, or if you have ArcGIS Enterprise, you just can call for that REST endpoint. And then basically I am invoking that UDF as part of a normal SQL query by passing the ID, the address, and once I do this, I can just merge the results into my original table, and now I will have a geocode table. So if I run this process, what you're gonna get at the end is a table that now has latitude and longitude. Now, latitude and longitude are numerical values. Still, I don't have a geometry per se stored. But what I can do is once I have latitude and longitude, I can use our capability called Query Builder. So these query layers, query builders, allow me to query directly into Snowflake. So here, for example, I'm specifying a query, and I am using one of the ST functions that are included in Snowflake. And look what I'm doing here. I'm using the ST make point to read latitude and longitude and creating a new column, which is a geometry column on the fly. And then I am just basically filtering this by city Redlands, where is Esri headquarters. And if I execute this query, what I'm gonna get, let me zoom to this specific layer, is the points, the geometry points for Redlands. Now, this geometry is being created on the fly in Snowflake. What ArcGIS Pro is doing is sending the query, executing the function, and pulling back that information. Okay. Now, some people may say, well, yeah, pretty simple when you have a very small data set. Well, that is true. What about if we execute this, though, with millions or even billions of rows? Can we do that? Well, the answer is yes, you can. Let me show you an example of that. I'm going to zoom out here to United States. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to query my complete table, but I'm going to use a different technique. I'm going to aggregate that information using the H3 lat long to cell function in Snowflake, still passing latitude and longitude, and then using another function, H3 cell to boundary, based on the new ID I am generating. I pass the ID, and I am getting the geometry boundaries for that X beam. As I do this and I execute this function, what I'm going to get is executing the function in the database, getting the geometries for the polygons, and pulling that back into Pro. So I can have billions of rows, aggregate that using the power of the database, and now you can see that the reddish the color, the higher the number of total insured value, because that's the kind of aggregation I am doing. Okay, so that was on the fly, that was impressive, but some may say, well, I don't want to execute this on the fly. I want this to be pre-calculated on the database, but I want also that this may be kind of a real-time connection. So whenever somebody updates the table, the new table, the new view also have the new value. Well, that can be done creating a view. So here, for example, like I'm creating a view using the same technique that I showed you before for the query on the fly. And I'm aggregating the data, creating this new view. And then now that I create this view, if you think about it, whenever the root table gets updated, the view also is going to get updated. Now this is when things become really cool because I can read that view now. It's connecting to the view, it's just pulling the data. And what I can do now that I read this view is I can transform this view into a web service. And this is the power of AWS Enterprise. I right click here, share this, and share as a web layer. What is going to happen is Pro is going to tell Enterprise that it has to establish a connection, a direct connection to Snowflake. You are not going to copy the data, you're just referencing the table. Once you do that, you can publish this as a service into our ArcGIS Enterprise environment. Okay, again, this is not a copy, this is a reference. You are reading the table directly from a Snowflake. Okay, so now that I have this layer in Snowflake, remember my goal is to identify areas with high risk exposure, right? So now in this map, I can see areas with high total insured value. Those are areas where I have a lot of policies, basically. I want to combine these with a layer that shows me potential risk. And what I can do is I can leverage what we call the Living Atlas, which is the biggest geospatial database in the world. So here in the Living Atlas, you have access to all kinds of spatial layers. One of those layers is the FEMA National Risk Index census. Here, for example, if I open this layer, you can see that we have all that information. If I click in any of these polygons, you can see, the census tract, different information, but then you have the risk index that is created based on a methodology put up by FEMA, but you can see, different other values like expected annual loss, social vulnerability, community resilience, what kind of hazards you have in that area. So all kinds of very, very, very important information for this kind of analysis. So I'm going to use this layer. Now, in ArcGIS, there are many ways how you can perform this. You can use the tools that we have here in analysis. In ArcGIS Enterprise, there are multiple tools that you can use. You can you do this manually, or you can automate this process. You can do it by Python, but also you can do this using our data pipelines. So here I'm reconnecting here, great. And you can see that through data pipelines, I'm basically creating a pipeline, right? So I'm reading the Snowflake layer directly from a Snowflake and creating this aggregated version. Yeah, remember this is the aggregated view, right? The XBean. I'm reading that. And then I'm reading this FEMA National Risk Index and doing a spatial intersection, an intersection using the geometries. And by doing that, I'm creating a new layer that now has my total insured value and the total risk. Once I publish or execute this process, I also can schedule this to be performed every 2 hours or once a day. So I'm sure that this new layer is always updated if the FEMA layer gets updated. So what I'm going to do is I'm publishing this, and then here's where the magic starts, because now that I have my new layer, I can use the app builder applications that Esri provides to create experiences like this one. So here I have my new layer, and I can filter now. I want to see areas where I have very high and moderate investment, right? My total insured value. And I want to see the intersection between these XBeans with those areas that has moderate to high risk. And these are the areas now that I need to focus. These are the areas that if I provide this to an executive, we can start developing measures on how to mitigate the risk. So we have achieved the task of identifying those areas. Now we can provide this application to start with the second phase for mitigation. Great. So let me sum up what you just seen. Let me go ahead here. Right. So what you saw today is first we read information using the ODBC into ArcGIS Pro. We have the direct connection to Snowflake. Then we had the problem of geocoding. So I show you three options. Option 1 is using data interoperability. Option 2, using Python in the ArcGIS notebooks, either in Pro or Enterprise. And option 3, using the UDF directly into Snowflake, tapping into our location platform. Once we geocode, we were able to create query layers. And as you saw, we can do it on the fly. We can read a view, different kinds of things that you can do. And then we publish that as a feature layer. The X-beams were published as a feature layer in ArcGIS Enterprise. And then we ask the question, once I have this feature layer, how can I perform the intersection between this and the FEMA risk index? Well, I could do it manually in Enterprise, or I show you that I could automate the whole process using data pipelines. So data pipelines either can read directly from a Snowflake or also could read the feature layer. And then we tap into the Living Atlas to find that FEMA layer, did a special intersect, we automate that pipeline, and then we publish a new layer. This layer had all the information we needed, and now we tap into the app builders to create a final application. So I hope this was helpful for you. Now you have a better idea of all the different ways how you can interact with Snowflake. And we have multiple resources that you can tap into. Here are some links. I'm going to add the link next to this video. And please, if you have more questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you so much. Have a good day.